Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Amnesty International says 106 people are believed to have been killed during protests in Iran. The protest erupted last week after a hike in petroleum prices. In a report, the rights body says the real death toll may be much higher, with some reports suggesting as many as 200 deaths. It says videos show police using firearms, water cannon, baton charges and tear gas to disperse the protesters in 21 cities. Amnesty has asked the Iranian government to end the crackdown immediately and respect human life. The Iranian government says the internet will be restored in different parts of the country once its abuse stops. Meanwhile, Iranian state media reports thousands have held pro-government rallies against rioting and vandalism. 14 Afghan soldiers have been killed and 9 others wounded in an attack by the Taliban in Kunduz province. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said fighters attacked a military base in the Kol Arbab Khalil area of Imam Sahib district. The spokesperson said First Sergeant Altaf was among those dead and 9 others wounded in the attack. He said the Taliban seized 3 US machine guns, an RPG, 4 M16 rifles and a sizable amount of military equipment. Local media confirmed the attack, but Afghan military officials and the Ministry of Defense have not yet commented on the ambush. Earlier, 2 US soldiers have been killed in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. The Pentagon says the cause of the incident is being investigated. 10 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party have been killed in Turkish airstrikes during a counter-terrorist operation in northern Iraq. In a statement, Turkey's National Defense Ministry said it carried out military operations backed by air power in the Haftanin region. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapon caches and terrorist shelters. It said over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq in past 4 months. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. In Syria, 2 civilians have been killed and 2 others injured in an Israeli air attack over Damascus. Damascus says it thwarted the attack and shot down most of the missiles before they hit their targets. State media said the missiles were fired by Israeli jets from above the Golan Heights and Marj al-Ayun. The Israeli army has confirmed it carried out strikes on military sites in Damascus. Yesterday, explosions were heard near the capital's airport. Since the start of the Syria's war, Israel has carried out hundreds of strikes on the country's territory against what it says are Iranian and Hezbollah targets. Yemen's Houthi rebels have released 2 South Korean ships and a Saudi-flagged tug seized in the southern Red Sea. In a statement, Seoul's foreign ministry confirmed 16 crew members have also been released. On Monday, rebels seized the ships a few miles off Sana's Ukban Island. Earlier, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia opened a channel with the rebels to end the 4-year conflict. Houthi rebels have been fighting the government for years in a war that has pushed the country to the brink of famine. China has threatened to retaliate if the US President Donald Trump signs the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act into law. Earlier, the US Senate passed the legislation aimed at protecting human rights in Hong Kong amid the pro-democracy protests. In a unanimous vote, the US Senate also passed a second bill that would ban the export of certain munitions to the Hong Kong police. Responding, China's foreign ministry spokesman Gang Shuang accused the US of interfering in China's internal affairs. Shuang said Washington is neglecting facts and applying double standards. Beijing pledged to employ strong countermeasures to safeguard its sovereignty and security. For more on this, we are joined by our correspondent in Hong Kong, Patrick Falk. Thank you for joining. Patrick, Beijing has said it will retaliate. So what could those possible retaliatory steps or measures be?
Well, that's not entirely clear at this point, but one of the other things that Geng Shuang said was that this goes against international law. So you wonder whether or not China might take this to some sort of international court. It's not clear what exactly that would achieve, though, because the Hong Kong Policy Act, remember, is something that was granted by the US. So presumably it is also Washington's prerogative to take these special trade and economic privileges that Hong Kong enjoys away. But all this talk of retaliation is probably a little bit too early at this point. Remember, this bill still needs to be sent back from the Senate to Congress for it to be reconciled, and then afterwards, it still needs to be sent to Donald Trump to see whether or not he's prepared to sign it into law. The other thing that China may do, there was a sort of suggestion, a thinly veiled threat, if you like, when the Hong Kong government opposed the move by the US. It said that there were 85,000 US citizens living in Hong Kong and more than 1,300 businesses here. So when we talk about retaliation, there is a possibility, I suppose, that Hong Kong might make it more difficult for American businesses to operate in the city.
Okay, with the two countries already struggling to reach an agreement over their trade war, can this act of the US Senate affect the outcome of the trade negotiations, which are most probably happening on day-to-day basis as well?
Well, it certainly doesn't improve the situation, but, you know, matters were already bad with Donald Trump over the last few weeks. First of all, saying that no deal had been agreed upon to remove or roll back tariffs, and then saying that if a deal isn't done, that the US could impose further tariffs on Chinese imports. But, you know, the question really is whether or not the US is likely to use Hong Kong as a bargaining chip in its negotiations with China, and if it does, that is something that China will no doubt not take too lightly. And this is something that China is taking very seriously. It did summon a senior US diplomat to discuss this matter, so it certainly doesn't want the US to go down this road, and we can see by its actions already that it feels very, very strongly indeed about this.
Okay, Patrick, as we have already seen, China's stance regarding the Hong Kong protests have been quite tougher. So after this particular move by the US, how do you think, how far will it influence China's handling of Hong Kong? Would its stance become more tough, or would there be a little bit of leniency being that might be shown by the Chinese side?
It's a good question because, you know, to an extent, what's happened here may be seen as an embarrassment by Beijing. How it reacts isn't entirely clear. Beijing may be further angered by what's going on. And as we've seen and we've said over the past several weeks, there is very little room for compromise between the two sides. And there is an important date on the horizon. We've got the district council elections taking place, or slated to take place on Sunday here in Hong Kong. And already government officials in Hong Kong are suggesting that with some of the violence that we've seen over the last few days, that there is a possibility, or reduces the chances of the elections going ahead. And the government here has already set conditions, if you like, for those elections to go ahead. It said that there can't be any violence, there can't be any vandalism, and there can't be any roadblocks. And it essentially wants a peaceful situation for that important vote to take place this Sunday.
Thank you, Patrick, for joining us, our correspondent from Hong Kong, updating us regarding the developments happening between the US and China. Now, moving on, US President Donald Trump has threatened higher tariffs on Chinese goods if Beijing does not agree to a trade deal. Trump made the remarks during a cabinet meeting in Washington. A spokesperson for the US trade representative says negotiators from both the sides engage on a daily basis. Earlier, the US and China agreed to a Phase 1 trade deal in October. But Beijing and Washington have since sent mixed signals about how they will move forward. The US and China have been stuck in deadlocked trade talks for almost 2 years. International financial institutions say the row has significantly slowed down the global economy. In another major development, China and Saudi Arabia have begun a 3-week joint naval exercise. The drills are being held at a Saudi naval base. China state media says the joint drills are designed to build trust between the two sides to combat maritime terrorism and piracy. The joint exercise comes amid heightened tensions in the Gulf region, with attacks on oil tankers and a major assault on Saudi energy facilities. Meanwhile, the number of the U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia will reach 3,000 in the coming weeks. In a letter to the U.S. House of Representatives, President Trump said the forces have been deployed to help the kingdom defend itself against Iran. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has announced his country is building a new tunnel under the Suez Canal. President Sisi said the infrastructure projects will be jointly administered by Egypt and Germany. He said Egypt has built 4 tunnels in the Sinai Peninsula and is building a 5th one. He said the plan to connect Sinai with the Egyptian mainland is part of a strategy to increase trade with the Gulf states. In May, Egypt opened tunnels linking Sinai to the cities of Suez Canal and the country's northern delta area. The Buddhist delegation visiting Pakistan has met Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and discussed religious harmony. The 30-member delegation from South Korea arrived in Pakistan on a week-long visit on November the 16th. In the meeting, Qureshi told the delegation how tolerance towards other religions is enshrined in Islamic teachings. He said Pakistan is home to important relics of ancient Gandhara civilization. Sharing details of tourism policy, the foreign minister said Pakistan will provide online visa service to promote religious tourism. The Joggi Order delegation, led by Wen Wonhaing, thanked the foreign minister for taking steps to promote religious harmony and tourism. 7 more Muslim litigants have become co-petitioners against Ayodhya verdict by the Indian Supreme Court. Earlier, All India Muslim Personal Law Board announced to file a review petition against the top court's verdict. Jamiat-e-Ulama-e-Hind has already announced its decision to file a review petition after holding a meeting with the Muslim Law Board. Earlier noted Indian historians and academics urged the Supreme Court to review its verdict in the case. On November the 9th, Indian Supreme Court handed over the Babri Mosque land to Hindus in a controversial decision. It's time for a short break, but coming up next in the Bulletin. London welcomes festive season with dramatic lights. And art installation connects Mexico with the US. Welcome back. Armed conflicts in Burkina Faso and the neighboring countries have forced thousands of people to flee from their homes. The United Nations World Food Programme is warning of an escalating humanitarian crisis in the region. Details in this report.
Wedged between Mali, Niger and Benin, Burkina Faso has been embroiled in violence since 2016. According to a UN report, incidents of violence have doubled in the country since 2018. And civilian deaths have quadrupled. Hundreds of schools have also been closed and farmers are abandoning their fields out of fear.
I left everything behind. I have no bicycle, no clothes. Just the clothes I am wearing right now.
Hundreds of thousands of people leave their homes to escape militant activity. And this has created a serious migrant crisis.
Already, over 860,000 people across the 3 Sahelian countries have fled their home in search of safety and remain internally displaced. The conflict is devastating for agriculture and for rural economies, and almost 1 in 3 children is out of school in many conflict-affected areas.
Now, a number of Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates are operating in the region with impunity. There was a spike in their activities last year, which has not abated yet.
The world does not yet fully grasp the extent of the mounting humanitarian crisis in the central Sahel region, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, which is fueled by violent clashes between armed groups, population displacement, hunger, and poverty.
As millions starve and thousands are killed in the Sahel region, the UN has asked for immediate action to address the situation.
Electricity firms have cut off power to thousands as Australia's devastating bushfires opened up a new front. Over 100 schools have also been closed in high-risk regions. Officials say the blazes have so far claimed 4 lives and destroyed about 2.5 million acres this month. They say the region will experience very difficult fire conditions in the next 24 hours. The fire service says this is the worst weather for fire as temperatures passed 42 degrees Celsius. The global media coverage of the signs of climate change is painting a bleak picture of our future on the planet. Today, the Earth is plagued by problems ranging from rising temperatures to plastic waste and a major loss of biodiversity. But renowned British naturalist David Attenborough says there is still hope for a better future. This is what he has to say.
93-year-old David Attenborough started working on zoology-themed shows on the BBC in the early 1950s. Since then, he's become a household name, delighting and fascinating audiences with his insight into the natural world. In recent years, he's devoted himself to raising awareness about the impending climate crisis.
People in all parts of society are aware of what's happening, and it's vile, it's horrid, it's something that we are clearly seeing inflicting on the natural world, having a dreadful effect, and there's something that they can do about it. So in a way it's a bit of a litmus test to see whether in fact the population care about this sort of thing, and people do.
Attenborough says he's most encouraged by the increasing activism of young people.
But I think we are changing our habits. I think the world is waking up to what we've done to the planet, and young people, as we know, are demanding that things should be done about it, and governments are doing it.
Millions of young people flooded major cities across the world in September this year, demanding action against climate change. Activists also have new figures to rally around, such as 16-year-old Greta Thunberg from Sweden. Most importantly, the climate now has political significance, with Green parties making significant gains in this year's European elections.
For decades, people have used art to share their vision of the world. In a similar way, an art installation by a Mexican visual artist aims to create a shared experience with people in the US. You too can share the experience with this report.
Artist Rafael Lozano Hema developed Bulletin, an interactive light and sound art installation. It's designed to strengthen the connection between El Paso in the United States and Ciudad Juarez in Mexico.
So that's my heartbeat going quite fast. And then let's hope that somebody in Mexico comes. I wonder, oh, someone's there. Someone's just touching the sensor, and that's their heartbeat.
Border tuner stations are located on each side of the border, featuring a microphone, a speaker, and a large wheel. Participants can talk to each other while large light cannons, synchronized with their voices, make the conversation visible. The project draws attention to coexistence and interdependence between the sister cities. Opened to the public on November 13th, the installation can be experienced until November the 24th.
Lows and the highs of the business world now. China has lowered its lending rate for the second time this week in an effort to shore up the economy in the face of the ongoing trade war with the US. This follows the first cut in a short-term market rate in 4 years on Monday. The People's Bank of China slashed its 1-year and 5-year loan prime rates by 5 basis points. Earlier this week, China's central bank also trimmed the 7-day reverse repurchase rate by 5 basis points. Central Bank Governor Yi Gang says Beijing will step up credit support and lower real lending rates. Asian stock markets traded lower today after US President Donald Trump threatened to raise tariffs on Chinese goods if a trade deal is not agreed. Stock markets across Europe are trading lower after the US President Donald Trump threatened to raise tariffs on Chinese goods if they do not strike a deal. Banks and trade-sensitive auto, oil and gas stocks were the biggest drag on the indexes. Frankfurt's DAX is trading nearly 1% lower as tech giant Wirecard saw its stock slide over 5.5%. London's FTSE 100 has shed 0.75% after retailer Kingfisher dropped over 7.5% as its third quarter sales fell about 3%. The CAC 40 in Paris has also lost over 0.5%. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses to close over 1% lower. Shares in industry heavyweight Samsung and SK Hynix dropped more than 2.5%. The Shanghai Composite fell nearly 1% lower as China's central bank slashed its new loan prime rates by 5 basis points. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.